Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and this is another edition of Let's Talk. We're talking politics, and the election is just around the corner. And today, our guest is Jenny Graham of the 6th District. She is the incumbent. And just a little bit of background, just to update folks if they hadn't met you via the media thus far. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am somebody that had never really considered running for office before. Politics found me when I was dealing with the aftermath of my sister being trafficked and murdered. The murderer was Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. And there was some fallout from that when I really started to look back into the cold case files. And I realized that crime victims weren't getting a fair hand in our justice system based on child sexual assault. They had a year to report, and it didn't matter why they didn't report. It didn't matter that you had rock solid evidence, and I just thought that was wrong. So I stepped up to work on that law reform successfully, and from there I realized that I really do have a special talent when it comes to standing up for crime victims and working for balance in our justice system. And if you're paying attention to what is going on right now in the news, that is something that is rare right now when there's so much focus on the other side of things. We need to bring it back to the middle. And I have a very strong and tenacious voice for that.
The 6th District is the district we're talking about. You are currently serving them. You were recently became the representative there. A little bit about how that happened.
Well, I worked really hard, and I do every day. It matters to me because I was just like you. I had so many questions on my mind as far as what happens at the state level. Where does the money go from our taxes? And I was in maybe some of your shoes where if you reach out to an elected official, they don't return your call. I, had gone to city council meetings and watched the disrespect of constituents that came to that forum to be able to talk to them about the things that they liked or they didn't like or they wanted to work on. And honestly, that is one of the things that propelled me into doing this. And it's important to me because of the fact I know that I've been on the receiving end of not being heard, that I work so very hard to make sure that no matter who it is and they call me or they ask for a meeting, that I take the time to talk to you.
This is certainly not a typical election year. I mean, 2020 has not been a typical year in any way, shape, or form. And so as a result, the process of campaigning for office has required a certain innovation that wasn't usually the case. Some certain traditional ways of doing this have not been available in many respects to candidates. Talk about how you're reaching your constituency.
Well, that's my personality. If for anybody that knows much about me, they know that I will find a way to go over a mountain, under it, around it, or right through it if I have to. And I came up with the idea of a mobile office. Our district office has been closed because of COVID. Going door to door has been, some people are okay, some people are not, and you're trying so hard, even if you're 10 feet away wearing a mask, to be able to let them know that you're out there and you are representing them. So I came up with the idea of a mobile office where I just grab a table, chairs, my signs, and maybe a pop-up if it was hot, and just made my way out to the 6th District to show the people, if you have a question or there's something you want me to know, I'm here if you feel comfortable talking to me. And maybe they wouldn't approach me, but it might now be on their mind that they either send me an email or call me. But the main thing for me was that they saw that I was out in the district working to represent them. And that's, to me, important, especially when, it's been communicated to me that it feels like elected officials kind of like dropped off the cliff, that there's been a lot of silence on issues. And so I've really, stepped up the game to be out there and be transparent about issues. And, even when it becomes controversial, it's not fun, but sometimes you have to stand your ground.
And there has been some controversy in your in your effort to be reelected. There are some issues associated with COVID. We just recently had a situation that occurred at a Yolks grocery market, and you had already anticipated things of this nature arising and had done some research and some study as to how to deal with these things. Had a chance to apply it in a real world application here just a few days back. Tell us about that.
Well, so months ago, living in the 6th district, there's a grocery store that G's been going to for well over 20 years, raising my family there. And a customer had come into constituent had some issues with not being able to use their EBT or SNAP card for curbside service or home delivery. And, it created a situation that if there's expectation for everybody to wear masks, sometimes, the people that have medical exemptions, that's not recommended for them. It can cause them harm. And so I literally had constituents saying, where am I supposed to shop for my groceries if I can't go in here?
That's because the EBT card could not be used
because of
the
fraud.
way cash and such could be used, credit cards, because of fraud. So if they were to use that, they had to go in the store, shop, and carry their own groceries out to their vehicle.
Right, and I went in to speak with the owners, the managers of the store to find out, okay, what are you struggling with? I mean, I have an idea already. Because I have a business sense. So, but I needed to hear it from them. And, it was just like Yolks. They were having problems with customers being angry, and they would shove carts in their employees. There were employees themselves that were struggling with medical exemptions. And so I really worked hard to follow up, is it the state mandate where you have to honor these medical exemptions and ADA laws matter because you can't discriminate against people with disabilities, or is it L&I and the health department that make that determination? And they were running into each other, which was putting businesses and people in a situation where it's this way in this store and it's this way in this store, and it's confusing. It creates anxiety and anger. So I just looked at it, from a common sense standpoint and thought, okay, obviously the state is the top. Everything else goes down from there. And, recognize that the main thing was fear. The main thing was not communication. So we came up with an idea for a placard, just a little, like a plastic placard that just slides on the cart that says medically exempt.
Because under HIPAA rules, an individual does not have to disclose
No, they don't.
what kind of a ailment they have.
No.
But the stores are not unreasonable in asking, do you have
It's the same thing with service animals. Right. So they ask, is this a service animal? That's reasonable.
Right.
Same thing. Do you have a medical exemption? That's reasonable. And they don't have to give you all the details, but they do have to honor it.
That's federal law that says they don't have to give you the details, but they can ask you, why are you not wearing a mask? I have a medical exemption.
Right.
And that's the end of the discussion.
Exactly. And they put the placard on, and I have been following this through months to check to see how are things, working out. As of yesterday, Kevin Kim from KHQ did an interview with me, and they haven't had any issues. So it's really sad that this happened with Yolks because it was completely avoidable if they would have known this. And I think what it does is it also allows for some consistency, that people know what to expect. And I know that some of the stores were trying to mitigate it by saying, you can come and shop if you have a medical exemption from 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning, one day a week, or, something like that. But I think, we need to, everybody needs to kind of stop and ask themselves, would that work for you? How would you feel if you were told that you can only shop after the store closes or 1 hour here, and it is actually going against what the mandate said.
There isn't just, though, confusion, Jenny, about this. There is also some serious doubt as to whether or not these sorts of restrictions are legitimate, not just in Washington State, but across the entire country. We're getting what would amount to competing scientific opinions, competing information, data, and such from the CDC, from the FDA, from the WHO. We're getting all kinds of information where the public's looking at it and saying they're not speaking with a single voice. And so we don't know who to believe. Plus the fact that we can look back historically, and you don't have to go far, 6 months, 8 or
Right.
so, and you have individuals who are saying, do this now, who are saying, you don't have to do that at all, it doesn't work. And then you have people who are saying, you don't have to do this now because it doesn't work, who did say once before,
I
it does
know.
work and you have to do. So as far as your constituents are concerned, how is it that they're not able to get a reasonable answer to what are reasonable questions with respect to how to conduct themselves in this atmosphere? This is part of the problem. And we're also seeing the courts in several states striking down mandates that also exist in Washington State, and almost universally doing that. It's not like some say you can do it and some say you can't. They're literally saying you can't. All right, the appellate level in the federal level. So so that raises questions as to whether or not the state can even mandate what it's mandating legitimately and lawfully. And there is going to come a point, and you as a legislator are going to have to deal with this. There's going to come a point where the public finally says, "I've had enough of this.
They're already
I've had
there.
enough of this,
They're-
and I'm not.
they're already there.
I'm not put. I know that
You're
they
already
are there,
there.
and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. I don't care what the mandate is. Get out of my life. That's where they are, and that's a problem.
Yes, and again, this comes down to conflicting information. It comes down to data that should be transparent. We should know, how did you collect this data? How did you catalog it? How did you tabulate it? And, there are legitimate questions that have come up with that. And it's another reason why I have so adamantly publicly been saying, and we've more than once written a letter to the governor's office asking for a special session. These are certainly issues that we could be talking about, we should be talking about, that affect you in your everyday lives and where we go from here. COVID's not going away. We have to learn to live with it. And I think that, again, this is another example of COVID teaching us some lessons if we're willing to learn those lessons. And that is, are we being honest about the conversation? Because if there is an expectation that if you have a backyard barbecue, it's a super spreader event, but we won't look at a peaceful protest or a riot or something along those lines and say the same language and say, look, the bottom line is this is serious. When we have a health director that with these peaceful protests says, that these particular individuals know the risk, but they feel that outweighs the risk and they're here. And instead of saying, look, I'm your health director and I'm telling you COVID does not care what your political leanings are. If you're here and you have underlying issues, you need to leave. Your health is at risk right now, and I can't condone that. And that's not what happened. So what that does now is, instead of saying, we really don't care where, what political leanings, what your issue is, this is serious enough that we treat it the same across the board. And that's how you tell the difference between what is, really, really majorly concerning. Not that COVID is not, but we are not having our hospitals overrun. And I think that it's fair to ask the question too, that, how exactly do we get around, when I drive around downtown Spokane and I see homeless population out there that are not distancing, they're not wearing masks, they're not following any of these things, and they're not overloading our hospitals. They're not all dying, because of this. There are so many reasonable questions, I think, that end up coming up that, why is it okay to punish this group of people when I was hearing, that type of language on COVID calls. And I was thinking to myself, why do we have to go there? Why can't we provide transparent information that, very clearly puts things into categories? And it's a matter of fact, Washington State's been called out for data not being accurate. So I don't think that it's fair to keep pointing back to, that me as a Republican doesn't follow the science or follow the data. That's patently false. I expect that data be accurate. I expect, to be able to talk to my constituents about this. And I'm always going to err on the side of I would rather give them information that they can look into, that they can confirm, so that they have confidence, to know that, this is what we need to do, this is why we need to do, and they can trust that, rather than say, if you don't do this because we say so, that we're going to punish you for it. I don't agree with that.
Well, one of the realities is with respect to the states all over the country has been that there has been a conspicuous absence of any kind of legislative aspect to this. These have been governors largely, mayors and such, and local health district authorities, unelected even in those particular instances, who have essentially been making these mandates. And where these cases in some states have gone to the appellate level, the court points out almost invariably that there has to be an involvement of the legislative branch in this process.
Right.
There are no laws specifically mandating what kind of penalties there should be if you don't wear a mask during a pandemic. There are no such laws.
No.
This is being simply done by executive fiat in Washington state and in many states. This is the case. So ultimately, it's going to come to the legislature to decide how to deal with providing the authority under which the executive branch acts, especially if this COVID, as you observe, is going to be here for a lengthy period of time. It's inevitable that must happen. So what are you proposing legislatively that you can do as a representative of the 6th District to help somehow or other stabilize the process by which we deal with this?
Okay, so COVID has uncovered an issue that we had no way of knowing. We've never faced this before. There was a glitch in our state law under, these, the mandate that's happened regarding emergency declaration. The problem came up because there's no definition of what an emergency declaration is. There's no time limit, and we actually do have legislation ready to go to rectify that, because I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. No one person should have that kind of power to circumvent the legislature, circumvent the people, which is exactly what has happened. So the legislation that we're looking at would limit the declaration of emergency to 14 days, and it would require them at that point to include the legislature, which hasn't happened up until this point. And then there is also an initiative, I-1114, that is basically the same legislation, only what it does is it puts the power back into your hands, the people, to say, no, we do not believe that one person belongs having this much power. So we, the people, are saying there has to be a limit. And, there was legislation that, we signed last session that has been kind of called into scrutiny, that we gave the governor this power to do this, and that's not true. That legislation was designed in the event we have a major catastrophe where it's fires, a flood, an earthquake, or a mountain erupting, that we gave the power for them to act quickly to get the money to the people that needed it quickly. But it was never meant to go on forever. And again, this is we're looking at what the consequence of not having those definitions are. And we will absolutely do that. That's another reason, again, why we've been calling for a special session.
Should the governor have called a special session months ago?
Oh yeah, a long time ago.
Why didn't he?
He has to answer that. He has to answer that. And, I think that he has in his roundabout way, but there are anywhere from budget issues to COVID to, so many. The list of things that we could be talking about and really need to be talking about are important, because we're not looking at the next legislative session happening until the middle of January next year. So this is, again, more time that we're going, and the programs that they voted in last session, and a lot of that was on party line votes, that we did not vote for these knowing that, you're just doing the tax and the spend, and at some point in time, what we really need to do is reflect and prioritize and do surgical cuts if we need to, rather than across the boards. And honestly, if we would have had the special session a long time ago, some of these programs that would have been kicking in now, they would have been able to stop, so that instead of money going into those, we would have been able to put it into education or, our law enforcement or, emergency services, any of those other things that really should be taking priority over some of those other programs that were passed. And now we're going to be looking at possible cuts.
Let's talk for a moment, Representative Graham, about education. Mm-hmm. This is the area where the average household is most concerned, because there doesn't seem to be a consistent application of rationale with respect to one school district to the next. And kids staying home means that a parent has to stay home or provide health care or child care in some way. And if the parent stays home, the parent can't work. So there's a direct and immediate and negative impact, an economic impact on households. Mm-hmm. And it seems to have an open-ended probability to it, insofar as we don't know how this is going to be eventually treated 1 month, 2 months, 5 months from now, because today we're in class, tomorrow we're at home. We're doing this kind of thing, and it is taking exacting an immense price from the average household in every state in the union, and Washington State is certainly not exempt from this at all. And parents are concerned about the quality of education their children are getting. They're also concerned about the mental health and physical health of their kids under these circumstances, consequences which have never really been thoroughly thought out by anybody. Mm-hmm. What about that?
And they're also not, again, if they're tabulating the loss regarding COVID deaths or, infections, I think, again, we should be also tabulating the other data as far as what's going on with suicides, what's going on with people that haven't been able to get into their doctors, that have died for other reasons. What are those deaths looking like? What price are we paying now for the mental health situation that we have coming? And it is a matter of fact. I've talked to medical personnel that they are seeing more and more and more of these mental health issues that are arising, and we're not necessarily prepared to handle this. So,
well, there's sort of an attitude that, we'll get around to that after we take care of this. But the bottom line is you cannot do that.
We can't afford to do that. We cannot afford to have that attitude. And I'm going to be frank, and I'm going to be honest. And, I've been doing that from the very beginning of this. It's exactly what's made me a target. Some people don't agree, and that's okay. It's their prerogative. But it's, I have faced things being said that were outright lies, and misrepresentations, which, it's not fun to go through that. But I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to talk about, we need to be willing to have an honest conversation that, why is it that we can have daycares that have been open this whole time, And we don't have widespread cases coming out from there that, there are care providers there that are being able to do this. Why is it that the same schools that our kids are not being able to go to, they can now offer paid, care that parents have to pay an extra price for? They're going to the same school and, getting all of these things. And part of this, I believe, is, and we could be dealing with this again at a special session, that there's concern about lawsuits. And so I don't blame the schools for being concerned, whether it's a teacher filing a lawsuit or a family filing a lawsuit. If you go anyplace else, if you go into a Costco, if you go into a restaurant, if you go into a daycare, they're not faced with the same concern over these lawsuits. And I don't believe that our schools should be facing that either. I believe
that's a legislative issue to make sure that
exactly.
concern doesn't exist.
That's right.
And the problem here is that we launched into a number of policies, the consequences of which were not thoroughly evaluated,
Nope.
and are only now being discovered in terms of the practicalities of them. But the legislature should have been invited in the first place, not just invited in, should have been brought
Right.
in as a mandatory partner in the decision-making process, and was completely ignored, and has been for months and months.
Right. Well, and again, and for the people that are watching that may not know, the governor, either calls a special session, but the legislature also has the opportunity to do that. What we need to do, have that happen, though, is you have to have a 2/3 majority willing to do that. And the Republicans were in the minority, so we don't have enough raw numbers. We have to be able to get support from Democrat colleagues, and we haven't gotten that so far. And again,
It's just another picture of the fact that politics has played a big role in this whole process, and it has no place in this. This is a public health crisis we're dealing with. It should not be a political football.
right. Well, not only public, but economic crisis.
But it arises from the initial public health reality.
Yeah, there are so many things that are affecting us right now. We're going to be paying for a long time, and I wish again that pressure would come up. We need a special session to stop some of these things, because again, we wait till the middle of January. We could now have had this time until then to really take on some of these issues and look for some solutions so that we can mitigate some of the harm that's happening every single day while we wait.
We have only a short period of time left, so let me ask you a question. This is essentially well laid out as the problems that we have. The question is, how is Representative Graham the best choice in the 6th District to take up the challenges? What do you bring to the table that are, if you will, distinguishing competencies, for example, that your opponent does not have, and why should one vote for you?
Well, first and foremost, I have a vote record to go by. And I do have experience as far as a record of representing everybody in my district, listening to what their issues are, working with them where, maybe we may not 100% agree on this particular issue, and we're doing everything we can to get there. But there's 1,000 other things, that we can work on and do work on. I think that what makes me unique is that I do actually, put politics aside. You elected me to be your voice in Olympia. And I do that. I'm getting a little bit of a reputation for being 5 foot feisty and hell on wheels and heels. But that's, sometimes you need that. I am not the type of person that will just rubber stamp something. And that is, my opponent is exactly that. When you talk about a lot of the things that we are facing, whether it's taxes, whether it's taking your freedoms away, whether it's, ignoring your parental rights, all of those things my opponent is on record for supporting. And I put you first because I believe that you're the boss, and the other is the opposite for him. They know what's best, and they expect you to go along or else. And, I publicly do not go along with that. And I'm not afraid to stand up and fight. There are plenty of either committee recordings for people to watch. They go to TVW, they can watch any of them. There's plenty of floor debates where no matter what the issue is, I am not afraid to stand up and fight. And, I love that in our caucus, we are told, vote your district. So I don't vote based on being Republican. I vote based on what I hear from my constituents. What matters to you? What do you want me to stand up and fight for? And, I don't back down an inch when I need to. And I think that that's important in this day and age when you have so many politicians that they don't want to take a stand either way because they're going to make somebody mad. And I think at some point in time, I'm that representative. You know where I stand.
We appreciate you being with us today.
Thank
you very much. She is Jenny Graham, and she is the current representative from the 6th Legislative District of Washington, seeking your vote as a Republican. That's this edition of Let's Talk. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.